A lonely truck driver is surprised by a mysterious encounter on the snowy road. An enigmatic wolf appears, bearing a silent and intriguing message. Other wolves appear, forming a supernatural bond with the man. This moment begins a destiny that will transform your life forever. Snow fell gently on the truck's windshield as Jack Reeves adjusted the heater. His hands, weathered by 20 years behind the wheel, gripped the steering wheel firmly as he navigated the winding roads of the Rocky Mountains. The sky, tinged with a leaden gray, barely revealed the setting sun. At 52, Jack knew every curve, every rock, and every sign of these routes like the back of his hand. The truck, a Kenworth W900 he had christened the Silver Bullet, was more than his work tool. It was his rolling home, his faithful companion in the solitude of the mountains. "It's going to be a tough night," he muttered to himself as he watched the snowflakes grow larger and denser. The radio crackled with interference, alternating between country music and weather reports, warning of an unusual storm approaching the region. The medical supply cargo he was transporting had to reach a remote clinic in less than 12 hours. It wasn't the first time he had faced adverse conditions, but something in the air felt different that night. Perhaps it was the way the wind whistled through the snow-covered pines, or maybe the strange luminescence that seemed to dance on the horizon. As he descended a particularly steep slope, his headlights illuminated something unusual on the road. At first he thought it was just a reflection in the snow, but as he got closer, the figure became clearer. A majestic, solitary gray wolf was standing in the middle of the road. Jack gradually reduced his speed, aware that a sudden break in these conditions could be fatal. The wolf didn't move. Its eyes, a deep amber, seemed to pierce through the windshield and look directly into the driver's soul. "Come on, move," Jack exclaimed, honking softly. To his surprise, the animal remained motionless. It was then that he noticed it wasn't alone. From the edges of the road, more wolves emerged, forming a semicircle around the one that seemed to be the leader. Time seemed to stand still. The snow was now falling silently, as if nature itself was holding its breath at this singular encounter. Jack turned off the engine, leaving only the lights on. Something inside told him this wasn't a casual encounter. The lead wolf approached the truck with deliberate steps. In its mouth, it carried something Jack couldn't clearly distinguish. With a fluid movement, the animal deposited its cargo on the ground and stepped back a few paces. A small bundle of gray fur moved weakly in the snow. "It can't be," Jack whispered, incredulous at the scene unfolding before his eyes. It was a pup, barely larger than a domestic kitten. After several minutes of doubt, Jack made a decision that would change his life forever. He slowly opened the truck door, the metal creaking in the silence of the night. The cold hit his face as he cautiously descended, his boots sinking into the fresh snow. The wolves watched, motionless like ice statues. The pack leader kept its gaze fixed on Jack as he approached the pup. When he finally reached it, he noticed that the little one was shaking, weakened by the cold and possibly hunger. With gentle movements, Jack took off his thermal jacket and wrapped the pup in it. As he lifted it, his eyes met again with those of the lead wolf. At that moment, a greenish light crossed the sky. A northern light, a rare but not impossible phenomenon at these latitudes, illuminated the scene with its supernatural glow. The lead wolf emitted a soft howl that was answered by the rest of the pack. One by one, the wolves began to retreat into the darkness of the forest. The last to leave was the leader, who, before disappearing among the trees, gave Jack and the pup one last penetrating look. Back in the truck cab, Jack placed the pup near the heater. Its eyes, a crystalline blue uncommon in wolves, reminded him of lightning streaking across the night sky. "So you'll be lightning," he murmured as he started the engine. The pup responded with a weak whimper and cuddled closer to him. As the truck resumed its journey on the snowy road, Jack couldn't stop thinking about how surreal the encounter had been. Why had the pack entrusted him with one of their pups? What had the lead wolf seen in him? The storm was intensifying, but inside the cab a new bond was beginning to form. Jack didn't know it then, but that encounter in the mountains would mark the beginning of an adventure that would transform not only his life, but that of the entire region. The pup slept peacefully while the Silver Bullet continued its journey through the night, its headlights cutting through the darkness like blades of light. The northern lights continued to dance in the sky like a harbinger of the extraordinary events that were about to unfold. The first rays of sun filtered through the windows of Jack's small apartment in Boulder when Lightning took his first unsteady steps in his new home. 3 weeks had passed since that mystical encounter in the mountains, and the pup had demonstrated surprising intelligence and adaptability. "Easy, little guy," Jack murmured as he watched Lightning investigate every corner of the apartment. The wolf, who had already doubled in size, perked up his ears at the sound of his voice and ran clumsily towards him, tripping over his own paws. The daily routine had been completely transformed. Stops during trips now included moments for Lightning to stretch his legs and take care of his needs. The pup had quickly learned to stay quiet during the journey, sitting in the passenger seat as if he had been born for it. One particularly cold morning, as Jack was preparing the truck for a new trip, he noticed something peculiar in Lightning's behavior. The pup, who normally jumped excitedly at the sight of the truck, was restless, constantly looking towards the mountains. "What's wrong, boy?" Jack asked, observing how the sky darkened prematurely. Lightning emitted a soft growl, his blue eyes fixed on the horizon. They decided to depart despite the signs. The cargo of construction materials for a remote town couldn't wait. However, barely 2 hours after starting the journey, Jack understood why his companion had been so restless. A hailstorm, the most violent he had seen in years, unleashed upon them. The pieces of ice, some the size of golf balls, furiously pounded the truck. Lightning became agitated nervously, his ears flattened against his head. "Easy, boy," Jack tried to calm him, although he himself was beginning to worry. Visibility was almost null, and the roar of the storm drowned out any other sound. Suddenly, Lightning began to bark frantically, something he had never done before. Seconds later, Jack saw why. An avalanche of mud and rocks was rushing down the mountainside directly towards them. With a sharp turn of the wheel, Jack tried to dodge the approaching mass of earth. The truck skidded on the wet asphalt, dangerously close to the edge of the precipice. At that critical moment, Lightning jumped onto Jack's lap and began pushing the steering wheel with his body. The wolf's instinct and the driver's experience merged in a perfect dance. Together, they managed to stabilize the vehicle just as the avalanche roared past them, taking part of the guardrail but leaving them miraculously safe. When they finally stopped in a safe area, Jack remained silent, processing what had happened. Lightning curled up next to him, trembling not from fear, but from adrenaline. "You saved my life, partner," Jack whispered, stroking the increasingly thick fur of the pup. "You knew this was going to happen, didn't you?" In response, Lightning licked his hand and looked back towards the mountains. It was then that Jack began to understand that his companion was not an ordinary wolf. There was something more in those blue eyes, an ancient wisdom that seemed to connect with the very forces of nature. The following days brought more signs. Lightning seemed able to predict not only storms, but also landslides and dangerous areas. Other truckers began to notice that Jack's route was always the safest, and soon stories began to circulate about the trucker with the wolf. One afternoon, while resting at a viewpoint, Jack observed how Lightning interacted with a group of wild wolves that had approached the area. There was no aggression or fear in the encounter, but a strange mutual respect. The wolves seemed to recognize something special in Lightning, something that went beyond their common origin. "You're a mystery, boy," Jack reflected as he watched the wolves walk away. Lightning sat beside him, his gaze fixed on the horizon, where clouds were beginning to form unusual patterns. The bond between man and wolf strengthened with each trip, with each obstacle overcome. But while Jack celebrated this unique connection, he couldn't help but feel that this was just the beginning. The mountains held more secrets, and Lightning seemed to be the key to discovering them. What neither of them knew was that soon they would face a challenge that would test not only their friendship, but also their role in the delicate balance between the human world and the wild world. Autumn had tinged the mountains with copper tones when Jack began to notice subtle changes in Lightning's behavior. Now a young wolf of impressive stature. Their usual stops at certain points along the route had become tenser, and the wolf spent long moments sniffing the air with evident concern. One early morning, while unloading supplies in a remote town, an old Native American man approached Jack. His wrinkled eyes studied Lightning intently before speaking. "The hunters have returned," he said quietly, "but this time they're not looking for deer. The wolves are disappearing." The news hit Jack like a punch to the stomach. Suddenly, Lightning's uneasiness made sense. During their last trips, they had seen fewer packs, and the nocturnal howls that used to accompany their journeys had become scarce. "Who are they?" Jack asked, as Lightning pressed against his leg, tense. "Outsiders," the old man replied. "They have contacts abroad. Live wolves are worth more than their pelts now." That night, camped in a secluded area, Jack noticed that Lightning was especially agitated. The wolf went back and forth from the truck cab to the edge of the forest, as if trying to communicate something urgent. "What's wrong, boy? Is it your family?" In response, Lightning emitted a soft howl that resonated in the valley. To Jack's surprise, a series of howls responded from the distance, but they sounded different, distressed. Without warning, Lightning launched himself towards the forest. Jack, after a moment of hesitation, took his flashlight and followed him. The full moon illuminated the path as they ventured into the thicket. After almost an hour of walking, they reached a clearing. What they saw there made Jack's blood run cold. Large camouflaged cages, some empty, others containing wolves. They were sophisticated traps with electronic locking systems. Lightning approached one of the cages, where a grey wolf, which Jack recognized as part of Lightning's original pack, looked at them with pleading eyes. Before they could do anything, the sound of engines in the distance alerted them. "Let's go quick," Jack whispered, but Lightning refused to move. His blue eyes shone with determination in the darkness. They hid among the bushes just as 2 trucks arrived at the clearing. 4 men descended, conversing in low voices as they checked the cages. "The buyer will arrive in 3 days, one of them said. "He wants the entire pack complete. Says there's something special about these wolves." Jack felt Lightning tense beside him. Through the dim light, he could see that the hunters carried professional equipment. Rifles with night vision scopes, tracking devices, satellite radios. When the men left, Jack and Lightning emerged from their hiding place. "We have to do something," Jack muttered, examining the mechanisms of the cages. "But we'll need help." Back in the truck, Jack spent the night awake, planning. He knew that confronting the hunters would be dangerous, but Lightning's gaze reminded him of the debt he owed to these animals, especially to the pack that had entrusted him with his companion. The following days were a race against time. Jack contacted old friends, a mechanic who knew about electronics, a local veterinarian who had treated Lightning in his early days, and several truckers who owed him favors. Meanwhile, Lightning began to behave in an even more extraordinary manner. Each night he would disappear for a few hours and return with information about new trap locations, which he marked on the map Jack had spread out in the cab. One afternoon, while checking one of the marked areas, they witnessed something amazing. Lightning had managed to gather several lone wolves from different territories. The animals seemed to coordinate under his leadership, as if they were preparing an organized response to the threat. "You're more than a wolf, aren't you?" Jack murmured, watching as his companion directed this unusual wild assembly. The answer came in the form of an out-of-season aurora borealis, which illuminated the sky with curtains of green and purple light. Time was running out, and the plan had to be set in motion soon. What Jack didn't know was that the hunters had also noticed their presence in the area, and that the bond between him and Lightning was about to face its most difficult test. As night fell over the mountains, man and wolf remained alert, aware that the real challenge was just beginning. The full moon illuminated the valley, and in the distance the howls of the captive wolves resonated like a call to action. The base of operations was established in an old forest ranger cabin, strategically located between the hunters' routes. Jack had gathered a peculiar but determined group: Mike, the mechanic expert in security systems; Dr. Thompson, a veterinarian with wildlife experience; and 3 trusted truckers who knew every trail in the mountains. "It's crazy," Mike commented as he examined the cage blueprints Jack had drawn. "But the system is simple. A simultaneous short circuit should release them all." Lightning, who had been observing the meeting with almost human attention, suddenly became alert. His ears moved towards the window seconds before a thunder rumbled in the distance. "A strong storm is coming," Jack warned, recognizing the signs in his companion. "It could be our opportunity." The plan was risky but precise. They would use the storm as natural cover. The electronic systems of the cages would be more vulnerable in the rain, and the noise of the thunder would mask their movements. While the others finalized details, Jack noticed that Lightning was restless. The wolf guided him to the outside of the cabin, where the first snow of winter was beginning to fall. In the twilight, several silhouettes emerged from the forest. They were the lone wolves that Lightning had been gathering. "Incredible," Dr. Thompson whispered, who had followed Jack. "They're forming an alliance. I've never seen anything like this." The improvised pack moved with surprising coordination, following Lightning's subtle signals. It was as if they had found a natural leader in him. Despite his youth and unconventional upbringing, the storm unleashed its fury that night. Natural lightning illuminated the sky, creating dancing shadows in the snowy forest. The group split into 3 teams, each with a specific task. Mike and 2 truckers would take care of the electrical systems. Dr. Thompson would wait at a strategic point to attend to any injured animal. Jack and Lightning, along with the rest of the pack, would be the main distraction. "Wolves are more active during storms," Dr. Thompson had explained. "The hunters know this and will be expecting movement." What the hunters didn't expect was the strategy that Lightning had developed. The pack dispersed in a circular pattern, creating the illusion of a larger number of wolves. Their howls, amplified by the echo of the valley, generated confusion about their real location. Jack, hidden among the trees, watched in amazement as his companion directed this wild orchestra. The snow fell increasingly thick, reducing visibility but facilitating their approach to the cages. Suddenly a different flash illuminated the sky, an aurora borealis so intense that it seemed supernatural in the midst of the storm. The captive wolves began to howl in unison, as if responding to an ancestral signal. "Now," Jack whispered over the radio. Mike activated the devices they had prepared. The cages, weakened by humidity and cold, yielded to the synchronized short circuit. In the confusion that followed, the captive wolves emerged like shadows in the night, guided by the howls of their saviors. The hunters, disconcerted by the storm and the apparent chaos, couldn't maintain control of the situation. Their electronic equipment, affected by the storm, was useless against the natural precision of the wolves. But in the midst of success, something unexpected happened. One of the hunters, more persistent than the others, managed to identify Lightning as the leader. His rifle aimed at the blue-eyed wolf, who was focused on guiding the last captives to freedom. Jack, without thinking twice, emerged from his hiding place. The sudden movement, combined with a deafening thunder, made the hunter lose his balance on the slippery ground. His shot was lost in the stormy night. Lightning took advantage of that moment to gather the entire pack, including the newly freed ones. As a single entity, the wolves vanished into the storm, their silhouettes barely visible under the dancing light of the aurora. The hunters, overwhelmed and disoriented, had no choice but to retreat. Their plans had been thwarted not only by human intervention, but by something deeper, the undeniable connection between the natural world and those who chose to protect it. When dawn finally arrived, the storm had ceased. The snow covered everything like a blanket of peace, erasing the traces of the nocturnal battle. Jack, exhausted but satisfied, found Lightning waiting for him at their usual meeting point. The wolf had changed. His bearing was more majestic, more confident. In his blue eyes shone a new determination, as if he had found his true purpose. "You've found your pack, haven't you?" Jack murmured, a mixture of pride and melancholy in his voice. He knew this moment would come, but he didn't expect it to be so soon. The months following the rescue brought significant changes for both Jack and Lightning. The wolf, while maintaining his loyalty to his human friend, began to divide his time between the road and the mountains, where his new responsibility as a leader called him. On a particularly cold morning, as Jack was making his usual route, he noticed something different in the environment. The sky had a peculiar color, and the clouds formed patterns he had never seen before. Lightning, who was accompanying him that day, was more alert than usual. "What's going on, boy?" Jack asked, slowing down the truck. In response, Lightning emitted a soft growl and pointed with his muzzle towards a little-traveled detour. Following his companion's instinct, Jack took the detour. The road led them to a valley hidden among the mountains, where an extraordinary spectacle awaited them. Dozens of wolves from different packs had gathered in what looked like a natural assembly. "Incredible," Jack whispered, turning off the truck's engine. Lightning jumped out of the cab and headed towards the group with a determined step. The other wolves received him with a mixture of respect and expectation. It was then that Jack witnessed something that would change his understanding of these animals forever. Lightning began to lead what could only be described as a ritual. The wolves moved in coordinated patterns, communicating through howls and subtle gestures. In the sky, the clouds swirled, forming circular figures, and a greenish light began to manifest, another aurora borealis, more intense than any they had seen before. The phenomenon seemed to respond to the energy emanating from the gathering. An old wolf with silvery grey fur approached Lightning. His movements were slow but dignified, and his eyes revealed an ancestral wisdom. To Jack's amazement, the old wolf bowed his head to Lightning, a gesture that was imitated by the rest of the pack. "The ghost wolf," Jack murmured, remembering the legends he had heard from the Native American elders. According to the stories, each generation a special wolf was chosen to maintain the balance between the natural world and the human world. Lightning had been prepared for this role from the moment he was handed over to Jack. His time with humans had not been a coincidence, but part of a larger plan to create a bridge between both worlds. The ceremony continued as the aurora borealis intensified its dance in the sky. The wolves began to howl in perfect harmony, creating music that seemed to resonate with the mountains themselves. Jack felt he was witnessing something sacred, a ritual as old as the mountains themselves. Suddenly, a beam of greenish light seemed to envelop Lightning. His fur shone with a supernatural glow, and his blue eyes acquired an ethereal brightness. When the light dissipated, something in him had changed. His presence was more imposing, more mystical. The old wolf approached Lightning again and touched his forehead with his muzzle. At that moment, a series of images seemed to flow between them, memories of ancient guardians, secrets of the mountains, knowledge passed down through generations. Jack understood that he was witnessing a transfer of power, a natural coronation that transcended human understanding. His companion was no longer simply Lightning. He had become the new guardian of the mountains, the ghost wolf of his generation. When the ceremony concluded, the wolves began to disperse in small groups, each carrying with them the renewed energy and purpose of this encounter. Lightning approached Jack, his eyes shining with a new depth. "So you've found your true path, haven't you?" Jack said softly, extending his hand towards his friend. Lightning rested his head on Jack's palm, a gesture that communicated more than any word could. The aurora borealis began to fade, but its energy remained in the air. Jack knew that his relationship with Lightning was entering a new phase. They would no longer be simply travel companions. Now they were guardians of an ancestral secret, protectors of a delicate balance between two worlds. As they returned to the truck, Jack noticed that the mountains seemed different, more alive, more aware. Lightning's howl resonated in the valley, a sound that now carried the weight of his new responsibility and the promise of protection for all who inhabited these sacred lands. Winter had arrived with all its force in the Rocky Mountains. Jack, now more aware than ever of his role as a link between two worlds, continued his usual routes, although Lightning's presence had become more intermittent but equally significant. One morning, as local news warned of an unprecedented storm approaching, Jack received an urgent call. A small town high in the mountains had been isolated by snowfall, and medical supplies were running low. "No one else will dare to make that trip," they told him. "You're our only hope." As he loaded the silver bullet with medications and provisions, a familiar howl cut through the icy air. Lightning appeared through the mist, his fur shining with that supernatural glow he had acquired since the ceremony. "Just in time, partner," Jack smiled. "I have a feeling we'll need all the help we can get." The ascent began under a leaden sky that promised more snow. Lightning ran alongside the truck, occasionally getting ahead to explore the road. His presence was different now. Every movement seemed calculated. Every pause had a purpose. Halfway through the journey, the storm caught up with them with unexpected fury. Snow fell in dense curtains, and the wind howled among the rocks like a chorus of ancient spirits. It was then that Lightning stopped abruptly, his eyes shining with urgency. "What's wrong?" Jack asked, stopping the truck. Through the blizzard, he could make out dark shapes moving on the slope. A family of deer trapped in a ravine, threatened by the growing accumulation of snow. Lightning emitted a howl that resonated through the mountains. To Jack's surprise, other howls responded from different directions. Within minutes, several wolves emerged from the storm, but not to hunt. Under Lightning's direction, they began to guide the deer towards a safe passage. "So this is part of your new job," Jack murmured, marveling at the scene. They continued their ascent, but the storm was worsening by the moment. The temperature had dropped drastically, and ice was beginning to form on the windshield. It was then that they saw emergency lights flashing in the distance. A group of hikers had been trapped in their van, the engine dead from the extreme cold. Jack stopped to help, but the situation was critical. The town was still an hour away, and the medications couldn't wait. Lightning seemed to understand the dilemma. With a decisive movement, he gathered his pack. The wolves organized themselves into two groups. Some would stay with the hikers, keeping them warm and safe, while others would guide Jack through an alternative route. "Are you sure about this?" Jack asked, recognizing the ancient Native American trail that Lightning was pointing to. It was narrower and more dangerous, but also more direct. The answer came in the form of an aurora borealis that momentarily broke through the storm clouds, illuminating the path like a divine sign. Jack understood. This was more than a rescue. It was a test of the new alliance between humans and nature. The ascent along the ancient trail was a test of skill and trust. The wolves moved like spectral guardians in the storm, marking safe points and warning of hidden dangers under the snow. Lightning led the procession, his fur glowing with its own light that served as a beacon in the darkness. When they finally reached the town, they were received as saviors. The medications arrived just in time, and news about the rescued hikers wasn't long in coming. The pack had protected them until official help arrived. That night, as the storm subsided, Jack and Lightning contemplated the valley from the town's viewpoint. The aurora borealis had returned, brighter than ever, dancing over the mountains like a mantle of green and purple light. "You've created something special here," Jack said to his friend. "A new form of coexistence." Lightning responded with a soft howl, and the mountains seemed to vibrate in response. The town's inhabitants, peering out their windows, witnessed the spectacle in amazement. Wolves and auroras, united in an ancestral dance that spoke of protection and harmony. The legend of the ghost wolf was beginning to take on a new form, not as a solitary being, but as the leader of a network of guardians who watched over both nature and the humans who respected it. Spring arrived in the mountains, bringing new challenges. The thaw had revealed forgotten paths and, with them, worrying signs of unauthorized industrial development. Jack began to notice heavy trucks and machinery in protected areas, where the ancient migration routes of wolves intersected with the traditional paths of indigenous communities. One morning, while making a delivery in a Native American community, a group of elders approached him with concern on their faces. "The land is restless," one of them said, pointing towards the mountains. "The spirits of the forest warn us of a great change." That same night, Lightning appeared at the door of Jack's cabin, his behavior more urgent than usual. His blue eyes shone with a particular intensity, and his fur seemed to emit faint flashes in the darkness. "Show me," Jack said, understanding the signal. Following Lightning, they ventured into the forest until they reached a hidden valley. What they saw there confirmed their worst fears. Excavators and construction equipment were strategically positioned, ready to begin what appeared to be a large-scale mining project. Lightning emitted a low growl, and from the shadows emerged other wolves. Among them, Jack recognized the old silver wolf from the ceremony. The animals moved with unease, aware that their ancestral territory was in danger. "This isn't just about the wolves, is it?" Jack murmured, understanding the magnitude of the problem. The project threatened not only wildlife, but also the water sources that fed local communities. In response, the night sky lit up with an out-of-season aurora borealis. The dancing lights seemed to form specific patterns, and Lightning watched them attentively, as if receiving instructions from a higher force. The following days were a frenzy of activity. Jack used his contacts among truckers and local communities to document the situation. Lightning, for his part, organized the packs in an unprecedented manner. The wolves began to appear in strategic locations, their coordinated howls creating a symphony that resonated throughout the mountains. The construction workers, superstitious by nature, began to report inexplicable sightings, wolves that appeared and disappeared like ghosts, glowing eyes in the darkness, and auroras that seemed to respond to the howls. One particularly significant night, while Jack was documenting the illegal activity, he witnessed something extraordinary. Lightning, along with his pack, performed a ritual dance under the full moonlight. The wolves moved in precise formations, their howls synchronized with the fluctuations of an aurora borealis that had suddenly appeared. The spectacle attracted the attention of local media. Images of wolves dancing under celestial lights went viral, attracting the attention of environmental groups and authorities. Public pressure began to grow, but the real transformation occurred in the local community. Inspired by the protective presence of the wolves, residents began to share ancestral stories about the ghost wolf and its role as guardian of the natural balance. Our ancestors spoke of a time when wolves and humans worked together as protectors of the land, explained a Native American elder during a community meeting. Now we understand that those stories were not just legends. The constant presence of Lightning and his pack, along with the inexplicable phenomena that accompanied them, created an atmosphere of reverence and respect for the territory. The construction workers, faced with increasingly mysterious events, began to abandon the project. One morning, as the rising sun tinged the mountains gold, Jack and Lightning watched as the last machine was removed from the valley. The victory had not been achieved through confrontation, but through the demonstration of the sacred power that resided in these lands. "You've changed more than the fate of a valley," Jack said to his companion. "You've reminded everyone why these mountains are special." Lightning responded with a soft howl, and for a moment, his form seemed to merge with the light of dawn. The aurora borealis, still visible in the morning sky, pulsed with a rhythm that seemed to be the very heartbeat of the mountain. The legend of the ghost wolf had evolved. It was no longer just a solitary protector, but the symbol of a renewed alliance between the natural world and the human world, a reminder that some places must remain wild and sacred. Summer brought unusual heat to the mountains, and with it, a discovery that would change Jack's understanding of his companion's true nature. During one of their usual routes, an electrical storm forced them to seek refuge in an ancient cave, marked with Native American petroglyphs. Lightning, who had guided them specifically to this place, was behaving peculiarly. His blue eyes shone with supernatural intensity as he examined the ancient marks on the cave walls. "What is this place?" Jack murmured, observing the symbols that seemed to come to life under the intermittent light of the lightning. The petroglyphs told a story, that of an ancestral pact between the first inhabitants of these lands and the guardian wolves. The images showed wolf figures with bright eyes, auroras, and humans working in harmony with nature. As Jack studied the marks, Lightning approached a particular panel. His presence seemed to activate something in the ancient paintings. The symbols began to glow with a faint light, the same color as the wolf's eyes. Suddenly, an aurora borealis appeared in the stormy sky, its lights filtering into the cave like spectral fingers. The phenomenon, completely out of place in midsummer, created a hypnotic effect as it interacted with the petroglyphs. The images seemed to come to life, projecting shadows that danced on the cave walls. Jack witnessed, amazed, how the complete story unfolded. Generations of ghost wolves, each chosen at crucial moments to maintain the balance between the natural world and the human world. "You've always been part of something bigger," Jack whispered to his companion. An old Native American man who had followed their tracks to the cave appeared at the entrance. His presence seemed expected, as if he had been called by the same forces that had guided Lightning. "The ancients spoke of places like this," said the old man, his voice mixing with the echo of the thunder. "Portals where the veil between worlds becomes thinner." The old man proceeded to explain how each generation of ghost wolves had faced unique challenges, adapting to the needs of their time. Some had been warriors, others healers, and some, like Lightning, had become bridges between worlds. As the storm raged outside, the old man shared stories that had been orally transmitted for centuries. He spoke of how the first ghost wolves emerged from the union between the spirit of the mountains and the will of the ancient guardians. "Your companion," said the old man to Jack, "carries in his blood the memory of all those who came before him." As if to confirm these words, Lightning approached one of the oldest petroglyphs. His fur began to emit a soft glow, and for a moment his figure seemed to transform, showing echoes of his predecessors. The storm began to subside, but the aurora borealis persisted, its colors more intense than ever. The old man explained that these phenomena were not mere coincidences, but manifestations of the power that flowed through the ancestral lines of the earth. "The ancient paths are awakening," said the old man. "Your friend is not just a guardian, he is a living reminder of forgotten promises." As they observed the petroglyphs, Jack noticed that some showed scenes that seemed to predict future events: changes in climate, challenges to come, and the need for a new form of coexistence between humans and nature. "Each ghost wolf has its own mission," continued the old man. "Lightning's is to remind us that we are not separate from the natural world, but part of it." When they finally emerged from the cave, the world seemed different. The storm had cleared the air, and the sunset painted the sky with colors that recalled the aurora borealis. Lightning stopped atop a rock, his figure silhouetted against the twilight sky. His howl, more powerful than ever, resonated through the valley, being answered by distant echoes that seemed to come from both other wolves and the mountains themselves. Jack understood that his role in this story went beyond being a simple travel companion. He was a witness and guardian of ancient knowledge, part of a legacy that extended beyond time and space. The years passed, and the legend of the ghost wolf and the trucker who became a guardian spread beyond the Rocky Mountains. Jack, now with silver hair and lines of wisdom on his face, continued to travel the mountain roads, though his journeys had a different purpose. Instead of transporting goods, Jack had become a messenger of a special kind. He traveled from community to community, sharing the stories of the ghost wolf and teaching new generations about the importance of maintaining balance with nature. Lightning, though aged, maintained his majesty and the supernatural glow in his blue eyes. His appearances had become more sporadic, but no less significant. Each time he allowed himself to be seen, it was as if the veil between worlds became thinner, allowing glimpses of the magic that permeated these lands. One summer afternoon, as Jack was sharing stories with a group of children in a remote village, an unexpected aurora borealis illuminated the sky. The dancing colors formed patterns that Jack immediately recognized. It was a message, a call. Following his instinct, Jack headed towards the mountains. The path led him back to the ancient stone circle where, years ago, they had awakened the energy network that revitalized the mountains. There, in the center of the circle, he found Lightning waiting for him. The wolf seemed to glow with an inner light, his form fluctuating between the physical and the ethereal. "You've come to say goodbye, haven't you, old friend?" Jack said, his voice laden with emotion. Lightning approached, resting his head on Jack's hand. At that moment, a cascade of images flowed between them, all their journeys together, the lives they had touched, the changes they had inspired. Jack saw how their joint work had triggered a wave of environmental awareness that extended far beyond the borders of the country. The aurora borealis intensified, and Jack could see translucent figures emerging from the light. The ghost wolves of the past, each unique but united in their sacred purpose. "Your time as an earthly guardian has ended," said a voice that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. "But your legacy will continue." Lightning began to glow with greater intensity, his form gradually merging with the light of the aurora. Before disappearing completely, he turned towards the forest and emitted one last powerful howl. To Jack's amazement, a young she-wolf emerged from the forest, her eyes the same brilliant blue as Lightning's. Beside her, a Native American boy of about 12 walked confidently. "The cycle continues," Jack understood. The boy introduced himself as Daniel, explaining that the she-wolf had chosen him, just as Lightning had chosen Jack decades ago. "She showed me the ancient paths," said the boy, "and she told me about you, the trucker who became a legend." Jack smiled, recognizing in Daniel and the young wolf the same special bond he had shared with Lightning. "You have a long road ahead," he said, "but you won't be alone." As the night progressed, Jack shared with Daniel everything he had learned in his years as a guardian. He told him about the secrets of the mountains, about the energy network that connected all living beings, and about the responsibility that came with being the companion of the ghost wolf. As dawn approached, Jack felt a deep peace. He knew that his time as an active guardian was coming to an end, but also that his work would continue through Daniel and future generations. "Remember," Jack said to the young boy, "the ghost wolf is not just a protector, it's a symbol of the connection between all living beings. Your task is to keep that connection alive." When the sun finally appeared on the horizon, bathing the mountains in its golden light, Jack bid farewell to Daniel and the young she-wolf. He watched them depart into the forest, ready to begin their own adventure. Jack remained in the stone circle, feeling the energy of the earth flow through him. He closed his eyes and for a moment could sense Lightning's presence beside him, as real as in their first days together. "Thank you, my friend," he whispered to the wind. In the years that followed, the legend of the trucker and the ghost wolf became an integral part of the region's folklore. Jack and Lightning's stories were told around campfires, in schools, and in traditional ceremonies, inspiring each new generation to protect the delicate balance of nature. And on clear nights, when the auroras danced over the Rocky Mountains, the inhabitants of the mountains swore they could see the silhouette of a wolf running alongside a silver truck, eternal guardians of the secrets and magic of these ancestral lands.